Happy, awesome Saturday, my beautiful friends. Good morning, good morning, good morning. It is wonderful to see everybody here today. Thank you so much for attending. This is the Awesome Saturday service. This is the Sabbath. We are here to get some ass on Awesome Saturday, and it is an absolute pleasure to see everybody here today. I'll dive right into the message today. If you guys are here for the first time, this service kind of dives into the more spiritual side of what makes the wake up call with Maui Paul what it is. And yeah, so this being Saturday, this is the Sabbath for me. This is a holy day. This is the day when I stop all of my striving for doing things and I relax into being, and really just kind of relax into my natural state of being a human being. So thank you guys so much for being here. It's wonderful to see everybody. Now, today we are talking about money, and the title is "Whose Image Is This?" So, whose image is this? And we're talking about money. We're talking about meaning, and most importantly, we're talking about like where our devotion is, where our where our loyalties lie. And so I want to just like really open this up by saying that unlike most Awesome Saturday services, this one's actually going to be very heavily biblical based. While I typically have a more holistic view of spirituality. There's just a whole lot of there's a lot of stuff in the Bible that colors the way that spiritual people work with money in our day and age. And I just want to talk about these things. And the first thing that we really need to get out of the way is that we think that money is ours. You know, we think that money belongs to us because we trade our lives for it. I mean, think about it. Well, we work for money. If you were to not receive a paycheck for whatever it is that you do for a living, would you continue doing it? And the answer for most people is absolutely not. As soon as the paycheck stopped, the attention would stop that way as well. Morning, Frank. Wonderful to see you here today. I hope all is well in Alabama. Um, but anyway, so we think that money is ours because we trade our lives for it. But it's not. Money doesn't belong to us. Money is a government issued permission slip. It's worth something in this jurisdiction. It's not worth something in another jurisdiction. It's always tied to somebody else's power. So we think about money as having like some powerful effect because we can use it to manifest change in this world. However, it's really borrowed power. And I'll tell you how I came to understand this. So I used to live in Costa Rica. I lived in Central America for 7 years, and I kind of traveled between Costa Rica and Panama, sometimes up to Nicaragua, but mostly Costa Rica and Panama. And one day I needed to go do a border run. So a border run is when you go and renew your visa. I was essentially a permanent tourist. So I would stay in Costa Rica 90 days, and then I would go to a different country and I would stay there for a couple of days. Then I'd go back to Costa Rica for 90 days. And this allowed me to legally remain present in the country. And so when I did the border run, the first thing that I did was I went and I grabbed about $1,000 in cash. And in Costa Rica, the way that the prevailing currency is the Costa Rican colone. The colone is what you spend in Costa Rica. You spend colones. You could also spend dollars, but only in the touristy areas. For the most part, colones was the currency. And so I loaded up about $1,000 of colones, and then I took the bus and I ended up in Panama, and I ended up in Boquete, Panama, which is a kind of like a retirement community in Panama. It's only about 15 miles from the border, and they speak English there. They use the dollar. And I went to pay for my hostel, which was like $15 or so. And I went to go pay with for the hostel, and I go to hand them colones, and they said to me, they said, "Oh, those don't have any value here. We don't want those. We don't want your colones." I was like, "Are you guys sure? Like Panama's only or Costa Rica's only like 15 miles away." And so if since it's only like it's very close, like surely you guys have surely the currency is kind of fungible, and it was not. They did not want my colones at all. They only wanted dollars because in Panama they use balboas and dollars. That's the currency down there. And a balboa kind of is a dollar. They just stamp the coins differently. They stamp the coins with the pictures of Panamanian, well, mostly Francisco Balboa. That's why they call him the Balboas. But really, like the quarters, the Balboa quarters are the same exact size and shape, and they use the same die as the U.S. quarters do. But anyways, the fact is that money only has value when the government that issues it has authority. And so if money only works inside of these invisible borders, these imaginary lines that we draw on the map, what is it really? And that money, it's not power. Money isn't even value. It's a placeholder. It's a placeholder for trust, and it's a placeholder for control. So money isn't just paper. It's legal tender. It's backed by law. In fact, if you look at money, it says it right on the money. It says this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private. You know where else it says it? Here's a Hong Kong dollar. Right, where does it say it? Here, Hong Kong dollar. Government special edition, legal tender in Hong Kong. So what is legal tender? I mean, the legal tender basically says that money has authority under the legal constructs of a particular geographic location. So money is a placeholder for somebody else's power. The government has the authority to use it in ways that it doesn't have authority over other forms of exchange. So if you and I were to enter into a contract that was denominated in bottle caps or denominated in goodwill, the courts would have a very difficult time enforcing the terms of that contract, because there really isn't. I mean, they would first have to figure out how much bottle caps or goodwill are worth as denominated in money before the court could do anything to enforce the terms of our contract. That's what legal tender means. It means that whenever we are indebted to each other or indebted to the government itself, that it must be denominated in dollars. Or denominated in colones, or denominated in Hong Kong dollars, or denominated in Filipino pesos, or whatever. The fact is that money itself is backed by the power of the law in ways that bottle caps, or I like you and you like me, isn't and can't be denominated. So try to pay your taxes in hugs and see how far it gets you. It's not going to get you very far at all. The government wants your dollars. They don't want your hugs. And so it kind of takes me to a story about really just a parable that Jesus told. So in Matthew 22:21, Jesus says, "Give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's." And the context here is that the Pharisees were trying to trap Jesus into making himself an enemy of Rome. So Jesus was an itinerant preacher, and he was a bit of a rabble rouser, which is why we now have a religion that's named after the guy. And the Jews at the time were very, very concerned about this, because itinerant preachers and rabble rousers would get the occupying Roman force all riled up, and then they would come and they would oppress the Jews. And the Jews had been oppressed plenty, and they didn't want to get oppressed anymore. And so they had this uneasy relationship with Rome. The fact is that the Jews were at the time under the subject to the authority of the Romans, as were pretty much everybody else. Historically, Rome ruled everything. I mean, they call it the Pax Romana, the Roman peace, which was enforced with Roman ballistae and Roman swords and Roman authority. And so the Romans would allow the Jews to maintain their spiritual underpinnings. They would allow the Jews to maintain their spiritual traditions. They would allow the Jews to have the Jewish courts and the Jewish laws. However, the Romans enacted their authority by making sure that all taxes were paid with the denarius. And so, so the Romans said, you can have your traditions, you can have your laws, you can have your sacrifices, you can have your temple. You cannot pay taxes in Jewish money. You have to pay taxes in Roman money. And in that way, they enforced their authority over not just the Jews, but over every other people that they subjugated as well. The denarius is found up, as far north as Britain and as far south as the middle of Africa. That's the level of authority that the Romans had when they had the authority over the world, over the whole Mediterranean world. And so the Pharisees were trying to trap Jesus into making himself an enemy of the Romans by asking him a political question, which was, should we pay taxes to Caesar? And Jesus doesn't really bite on this one, much to the chagrin of the Pharisees. He says, bring me a coin. And so they bring him a coin, and he says, whose image is on it? And they said, well, it's Caesar's image. And he says, well, whose inscription is on it? And he says, well, it's Caesar's inscription. And then he says something that really, really just sidesteps the entire issue. He says, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's. And so what he's really saying is the coin bears Caesar's image. Our life bears God's image. And that's the distinction. We belong to the one whose image we bear. We don't belong to the world systems. We belong to the one who created us in the image and likeness of God's self, as stated in Genesis 1:27. And so, we have to think to ourselves, well, either we're going to serve these world systems or we're going to serve God who is. And a counterpoint that I hear quite a bit when people talk about, money is, well, I earned that money. And yes, indeed, you did earn that money. You earned the money, but only within a system that defines what work is worth and prints the currency that we are paid in. We live in that system and we can't escape it. We have to be in that system. That doesn't mean that we have to be owned by that system. And so think about what we really trade money for. We trade money for time. So we trade our existence for these pieces of paper. And here's a piece of paper right here. Do you know who this guy is? This guy right here? A political leader, George Washington. Now, in the system that I currently live in, this has power. It doesn't have a lot of power. It has the power to trade it for like a candy bar and a half, maybe a single candy bar at a vending machine. But this thing, I can trade this for value, and I can trade a portion of my life for a certain number of these. Now, when I was in the Philippines, this had power. This had a tremendous amount of power. I could trade this for a cab ride. I could trade this for a portion of a hotel room. I don't know who this guy is right here. I have no idea who this guy is. I can't even read his name because, it's written in Tagalog. So I have no idea who this person is. But this person's picture has tremendous power in the Philippines, and it has no power whatsoever in the United States. I use this as a bookmark. This is a bookmark in the USA. But in the Philippines, people will trade their lives for this, because the Philippine government has the authority to issue these. And if you misuse this thing in the Philippines, then the big scary men are going to come with guns, and they are going to compel you by force to use it in the way that they say is okay. And so we trade time for money. And we don't just trade effort, we trade our existence, our very limited existence. We only have a certain amount of time. And yet we trade it for these rectangles of various different colors. And so when somebody steals our money, we say that they took time away from us. When somebody scams us, we feel robbed of our lives because somebody got something away from us without giving us anything in return. When somebody wastes our time, and I'm sure that you've had a situation in your life where somebody was droning on and wasting your time, we bristle at it, because consciously or not, we know that time and life are synonymous. Think about the way that the government actually expresses power in our lives. Think about the way that the state manifests that power. They take our time. When we misbehave enough, they put us in prison, and prison is time taken away. We could be out there being creative and doing whatever we want to do, but instead we're stuck in a prison cell. When we speed down the road and the government isn't happy about it and they catch us, what do? They give us a fine. Well, what is a fine except quantified time? We have to spend a certain amount of time doing something that we don't want in order to pay this fine that we don't want to pay. That is power manifest. It is hours converted into dollars. It is time. And what about the death penalty? The death penalty is all of our remaining time. When we misbehave so badly that the government says, you know what, you've miscreated so poorly that we're going to make sure that you can't miscreate anymore. That is the ultimate expression of the government's power over money and life. And so that's why Jesus was so precise. He acknowledged that Caesar had a claim to the coins that Caesar created. Just like this guy that I've never heard of and don't know his name and don't read Tagalog, so I can't pronounce his name. Just like this guy has authority over this green or this purple-ish rectangle, so too does the jurisdiction that I'm under, the jurisdiction that issues this green rectangle, have authority over, or have legal jurisdiction over my life? But that legal jurisdiction does not translate to divine belonging. And that was the point of it. Now, if there's one thing that separates spiritual people away from money more than anything else I've ever heard of, it is another, it is a quote that actually doesn't come from Jesus. It comes from Paul, the one that I'm named after, actually. It says, "For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil," which I have heard misquoted over and over and over again as money equals evil, or the love of money is evil, or money is evil. Money isn't evil. Money itself isn't evil. It's the love of money that's evil. It's the love, it's the obsession, it's the idolatry of money. It is the misplacement of devotion away from life itself and toward the systems that we use to trade value between each other. When we love the medium of exchange more than we love the people with whom we are exchanging, that itself creates all manner of evil. Nobody ever had the idea to scam another person because they wanted to help them. They had the idea to scam another person because they felt that their life should be dedicated toward robbing somebody else of the fruits of theirs. And so people hear that money is evil and decide that spiritual folks should stay broke. They're like, well, if money is evil, I don't want to bring evil into my life. I don't want to bring sin into my life. But that's not what Scripture says, and that's not even what Jesus modeled. And so money is like an all-consuming fire. I mean, when we put it in its proper place, we can cook our food with it. We can warm our house with it. We can build society with it. But when it's uncontained, when we have an unfettered lust for it, it burns up everything that we love because it consumes our time and prevents us from doing that which is most important. So Jesus wasn't against money. Jesus was against obsession. Jesus was against chasing money, because when we chase money, we lose our lives to a system that will never love us back. When we chase life, money flows naturally as a byproduct of us living in our purpose. In fact, the vast majority of folks that I've ever talked to who are actively seeking a purpose-driven life they think that they must earn a lot of money so that they can finally achieve their purpose, instead of just living their purpose and then allowing the money to flow naturally as a byproduct of that purpose. And we all know that we need money to live. I mean, the fact of the matter is that that even Jesus said, your Father knows that you need these things. He pointed to a higher order. But the point is alignment with who we are. The point is not avoidance of money. The point is aligning whatever it is that we do in order to create the money that we need in order to live. And so I'm sure that you've noticed this. I've noticed this. It's that the people who worship money always seem really stressed about losing that money. And so the problem, of course, is that money, being a world system, is subject to having the rules changed. I mean, right now in the United States, we are in a period of tremendous inflation. Well, what is inflation except that the government just keeps on printing more money without the labor to back it up? They want something, so they print money to pay for that something. And then the pie is larger, and then the money itself becomes worth less. And eventually, when the money becomes worthless, not just worth less, but when it becomes worthless, then the government can no longer use that as a lever to control control their power. And at that point, things get really, really messy, at least historically. So we'll go right back to the teachings of Paul, because the teachings of Paul are the ones that have informed modern Christianity to this very day. And whether you believe Christianity or not, the fact is that if you're in the United States, you live in a country and a culture that was completely informed by it. So at least understand how it works. But in in the letter that Paul wrote to the Romans, Paul wrote that the wages of sin is death. And elsewhere in Romans, he said wages are not credited as a gift, but an obligation. And so when we so when we sin, which means that we have some kind of an error in our aim, then the death that we receive is what we are obligated to receive. So when we chase the money itself instead of just chasing the meaning that then creates the money, then the lack of our lives, the lives that we're not allowed to live because we spent all of our time doing the chasing instead of the loving, that is credited to us as an obligation. We are obligated to die because we have chosen to worship world systems instead of worshiping God who is. So the fact is that there's another very famous Jesus-ism. It says, "Seek first the kingdom of God and God's righteousness, and all of these things will be added to you." And have you ever noticed that when you're really on life purpose, that money just sort of seems to come at the right time, at the right pace? Um, I don't know about you, but I've had times in my life when I've had a lot of money, and I've had times in my life where I didn't have a lot of money, and I'm still alive. No matter what, the resources necessary for me to continue living have continued to flow, whether I was chasing them or not, and whether I was doing the right thing or not, and whether I was focused on stuff or not.
What was it? Was it a Bible verse or something else? It was about the birds and how they don't have to work, but they're always fed and they're always taken care of.
Oh, Pepper is referencing Luke 12:22, which is consider the ravens. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, yet God feeds them. And who are you to worry about your life? Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothes? That is what she's referring to. It's actually a verse about worrying, about not worrying, really, because if you think about it, like we continue to persist. So the fact is that the world runs after all of the trappings of the world. The world runs after all of the world runs after all of these systems, and doesn't really run after the love that powers these systems. And so, in the kingdom of God, value is not a transactional thing. Value is a relational thing. Life itself is a gift. Did you pay for life? Grace is not a wage. Salvation is not a contract. All of these things are gifts freely given from the one who gives all gifts. And so we have to stop thinking, how do I earn more? And we have to start thinking, how do I express more of who I really am? Money follows that thing. As the preacher, I'm pretty sure it was Charles Spurgeon, said, God's will done God's way will never lack supply. And if and so when we are aligned with our purpose, money always arrives when it's needed. Not always in abundance, always with uncanny timing, and always with sufficiency. And so we give to Caesar what is Caesar's. We pay our taxes. We live in the world. We use the coin. And we give to God what is God's. And that's us. That's ourselves. That's our lives. That's our effort. That's our energy. That's our heart, our time, our imagination, and our love. We give that to God. We give that to God by loving the people around us. And we give and we pay taxes to Caesar because that's the authority that's been established. And so we are not a coin that can be spent. We are a seed to be planted. And so let's invest our life where it grows, and let's invest our time where it grows, and let's make sure that we are always growing into being the best and biggest and most beautiful, boldest versions of ourselves. The fact of the matter is that our life is going to speak louder than anything that's inside of our wallet, and that when we are rich, let's be rich in meaning, and then the means will follow. All right, my beautiful friends, I want to say thank you guys so much for being here, for hanging out with me at the Awesome Saturday service. It's always fun to share the more spiritual side of what really empowers all of these I am statements that I lead people through every Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. I've always been a proponent of no matter what your religious belief or faith is, understand the prevailing one in your area. When I was living in Costa Rica, I came to understand a lot more about Catholicism because every single person around me was a devout practicing Catholic. And while I didn't know much about Catholicism before I went there, I knew a lot about it when I left, and it helped me to understand the people and to love the people for who they are and where they were. And so I'm a huge proponent of understanding the spiritual underpinnings of the building blocks of the societies that we live in, because they help us to more readily and easily live in these societies. All right, so I want to say thank you guys so much for being here. Good morning to Susan. Good morning to Frank. Wonderful to see you guys. Thank you so much for joining me on this little adventure. Money is something that trips up a lot of people, especially people who have purpose to live ethical and moral lives. And the fact is that when we correctly interpret and understand the scriptures that define our lives, whether or not we actually hold them to be canon. The fact is they define the lives of the people around us, even if they don't define ours. When we misinterpret that stuff, then we are subject to the errors and consequently are going to reap death from those errors. So let's reap life instead by having a more full understanding of what was really being said. All right, so my beautiful friends, I will be back on Monday at 9 a.m. Until then, thank you so much for being here with me. I love you. I care about you. I appreciate you. Happy, awesome Saturday. Let's remember that we are awesome, and so let's recognize our inherent value and worth. Let's recognize that just because we are here on this world, on this earth, on this side of the ground, that we have a tremendous, tremendous amount of power. And let's use that power for good. Let's love the people around us. And let's focus on that love. Let's seek first that kingdom of God, and then everything else will be added to us as it has from the day we were born until this day, right now. We've always had exactly what we need, and we have never, ever, ever had catastrophic loss come because of a lack. All right, my beautiful friends, I'll talk to y'all tomorrow or on Monday at 9 a.m. Until then, I love you. I care about you. I appreciate you. And I will see you all around the pool or around the internet. Aloha from paradise.